The first time I played Super Smash Bros., I was a young ninja lad of 10. I was on an assignment that took me to a theme park, don't ask, and Nintendo had set up a booth demoing the game. I had seen the commercials for it and was somewhat aware of it, so in a strategic move to draw out my target, I decided to give it a go. It was a fighting game I had never experienced. Up until that point, the fighting genre was essentially locked into one form, and you can understand why. The limited technology of the late 80s to the late 90s meant visualizing something like a one-on-one fight was usually in a first-person or third-person behind-the-back perspective, or the two-dimensional perspective that became the standard for the genre. Sure, I was well versed in the more popular fighting games, Super Street Fighter II, The New Challengers, and Killer Instinct on the SNES being my favorites, but Smash Bros. Was completely different. Even as gaming moved towards the 3D era and games like Virtua Fighter and Bushido Blade were adapting 3D planes to their fighting games, they were still rigidly bound to the traditional formulas of the 2D fighters. The freedom of movement coupled with the fluidity of combat, the simple yet nuanced controls, the dynamism of stages made Smash feel so new to me that despite being fairly simple, when actually playing around, I had no idea what I was doing. Super Smash Bros. Earned an almost immediate legacy status within the fighting game genre, mainly to the point of it being unique as an in-universe Nintendo franchise fighter, with every available character representing Nintendo's strongest franchises at the time. Mario and Luigi, Super Mario Bros. You could argue Yoshi fits in here as well. Link, The Legend of Zelda, Samus, Metroid, Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Country, Kirby, Kirby's Adventure, Fox McCloud, Star Fox, Pikachu and Jigglypuff, Pokemon, Captain Falcon, F-Zero, Ness, Earthbound. This may be in part to the N64's limited hardware, in retrospect, which limited the roster. There may even be an argument that the inclusion of Ness and Captain Falcon were outside the norm, since F-Zero was not a long-standing series, having only F-Zero on the SNES and F-Zero X on the N64, and Earthbound being much more popular in Japan than in North America. And it's not like it was the first fighting game to cross over characters from prominent franchises, as Marvel vs. Capcom released in 1996, originally titled X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and was very big in the arcades. However, I would argue that a game like Marvel vs. Capcom appealed more to niche audiences, since knowing and appreciating its roster was dependent on your exposure to both Marvel comics and the wider release of Capcom games. Sure, as a young ninja, my rigorous study of all the world's information meant that I may have been able to recognize and name every character from both Marvel and Capcom. I can't speak for many gamers who probably wouldn't know any of the characters from Darkstalkers. And sure, even at my young age, my heightened ninja reflexes and superior adaptability made the gameplay fairly simple to grasp. I can say nothing for the majority of gamers who may have had difficulties with the complexity of Marvel vs. Capcom's combat in comparison to something like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, which isn't to say those games also weren't complex in their own way. However, what made Smash Bros. So genre-redefining was that most any gamer of varying degrees of skill could easily pick it up and understand its two-button in any direction combat, as well as being provided a number of ways to approach combat, be it through the wider range of movement or the various elements present in each stage. Furthermore, given the ubiquity of characters like Super Mario, Donkey Kong, Link, or Pikachu in both gamer and popular culture, most people, gamer or not, could pick up Smash Bros. And know who they were playing as. I posit that the series took off specifically for the reason that it pitted such recognizable characters from such legacy franchises against each other in such a digestible fashion. It's for this very reason that years later, Sony would fail with PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Not only was it a naked attempt to copy Super Smash Bros., badly I might add, but so much of its roster is padded out with characters who were forgettable, from games released on other consoles, and far too recent to be considered legacy characters iconic to the PlayStation brand. I mean, they put Dante in and didn't even make him the recognizable version from the games that were exclusive to the PlayStation. Don't get me wrong, I love DMC, but this was a bonehead move. And the Big Daddy? BioShock was an Xbox and PC game for years before it came to the PS3. What sense does that make? Anyway, while Super Smash Bros. Melee would go on to polish and redefine an already great game, tightening the controls, making the game faster and more fluid, and greatly expanding the roster of Nintendo characters, it was Super Smash Bros. Brawl that would mark the beginning of where the series began to transcend itself. While the initial trailer at E3 2006 would floor fans with the inclusion of Nintendo icons like Pit, Wario, and Meta Knight, it was the final moments of the trailer that really stood out. The screen goes black, and we hear the familiar sound of the codec from Metal Gear Solid. Sure enough, Solid Snake is in Smash Bros. Brawl. While yes, it can be argued that Metal Gear was released on the NES, I think everyone can agree that when you think Metal Gear, you think PlayStation. Not to mention, Hideo Kojima did say the NES version was unfaithful to his original vision. This was the tip of the iceberg, a character commonly associated with a PlayStation franchise appearing in the prestigious Nintendo fighting game. But then something massive happened, something no one saw coming. If you weren't like me and checking Smash Bros. Dojo every day for updates, then you would have no idea of this character showing up until the very end of Brawl's campaign. I speak, of course, of Sonic the Hedgehog. This was monumental. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, then you knew how deep the rivalry of Sega versus Nintendo went. To see their biggest mascots duking it out in a game together was unreal. It was at this point where Smash Bros. Went from just a Nintendo fighter to something bigger. It was no longer a game about pitting Nintendo characters against each other. Now actual gaming icons from other systems were getting in on the action. And nowhere is this more notable than both Smash Bros. 4 and subsequently Smash Bros. Ultimate. While Smash 4 expanded the roster with a number of iconic Nintendo characters, such as Little Mac, Rosalina, Bowser Jr., and the Villager, it was the inclusion of characters like Pac-Man, Mega Man, Duck Hunt Dog, and then Simon Belmont in Ultimate, which made such a huge difference. While there's no question that these characters are from games that are synonymous with the NES, I would argue that they've evolved beyond simply being synonymous to Nintendo itself. They're legacy characters, icons within gaming itself. This is only compounded further by the inclusion of Ryu and then Ken from Street Fighter, one of gaming's most well-known fighting games. Cloud Strife, the main character of what is thought to be the greatest Final Fantasy, if not one of the greatest games of all time. And now with Banjo and Kazooie and the hero from Dragon Quest. No longer is Smash Bros. A game about Nintendo characters fighting each other, it's been shaped to a game where gaming legends come to do battle. And I don't think I'm alone in this line of thinking, not with the vocal outcry from gamers when Bomberman, another iconic gaming character, was included not as a playable character, but as an assist trophy, or the long demand to have Rayman included as a playable fighter. I think as time goes on, Super Smash Bros. Will only continue to feature more characters from gaming's storied pantheon, and it really makes sense. There's no company more synonymous with gaming than Nintendo, so too should their Coliseum feature the most historic characters in the medium. Well, thanks so much for listening to my Ninja Wisdom. If you liked this video, hit that like button and be sure to let us know what you're thinking in the comments. If you're new here and you want to see more videos from an actual ninja, subscribe to my channel, and be sure to hit that little bell icon to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. But for now, I shall leave you with these parting words of Ninja Wisdom. Life consists not in holding good cards, but in playing those you hold well.